Hey everybody, it's the Iron Sun, and this video is called A Fall from Grace. And this is actually, so I'm doing a live stream here just on the falling out of my relationship with my ex-fiance. And one of the main reasons I wanted to do it was just to give uh, some guidance to maybe some guys who haven't actually had long-term relationships and maybe tell them some of the pitfalls that I saw in it. Um, so this isn't something where I'm just trying to take a dump on someone, something like that. There were one thing I would say is there were faults on both sides with me and my fiance in the past. Um, I think towards the end it got pretty nasty. Um, yeah, so I'll get into it. Um, it'd be nice to have someone on, but I'm not sure. I don't know what GM's might check her channel. So I'll be on for a second, and then we'll kind of get into what was going on. I don't think she's up now. She did something yesterday. You know what? I'm gonna actually look at some of her content real quick and just put it on the screen. Might be interesting. Share screen size. Share screen. I think that's what we do. Window. Is it window? Yeah. Hey, I'm actually staying on this time, so this is going to be a stream, like I said, where I'm going to explain what was going on in the relationship and just kind of throw out some lessons that maybe other guys could glean from and just learn, what works, what doesn't work, stuff like that. If you want to come on, you should. It'd be pretty dope. Just let me know. I'm actually looking at some of the stuff. Gonna browse some of the stuff you had in your video real quick. The one you did, the feminist puppets. Um, kind of do a little current events real quick before I get into the main topic. See if I can pull it out. Entire screen. Okay, I'll do that. Cool. Just want to get into some snippets on what you were talking about. Skip.
Coming out of their mouth.
I want to take it.
I mean, it is
I want to take it out of context.
a part of STEM now. We cannot do anything. I mean, the elbow spaces they have gained, they are not going to just give away and come back to the, civilization, playhouse, and something like that. People actually are selfish when they get something. They are not willing to get, give it away for free.
Right.
That is a human tendency, and we have to make peace with the fact. Just like I made.
Oh yeah, sure, no problem. I'll probably do an addendum to it later. Yeah, I wanted to do something. So yeah, this video's, I can tell it's really intricate, so I'm actually gonna have to do a breakdown later. I'll just kind of get into I'm gonna get into the meat and bones of what was going on with my relationship, in a way that respects both parties involved. Um, so there were a lot of interesting issues going on. One of the main ones was she felt like she wasn't being listened to and wasn't being heard. And there's a lot of things with that I don't know. That was her complaint. My complaint was a lot of times the sex was being withheld. There wasn't a lot of there wasn't really any wasn't a lot of compromise with sex. Wasn't a lot of compromise with my needs in particular. It kind of got to a point where uh, she stopped wanting sex, and in my mind, I didn't go to the most extreme, which would have helped in that situation because that kind of goes back to the Cold War dynamic when uh, people are using something against you and they're not putting in the same value as they did in the start of the relationship. So I never stopped. So I didn't stop putting in the value like I did in the initial part of the relationship. I think she stopped most of that. Um, one thing I would say is there were certain, I think there was probably more of a sense of urgency in the beginning on my part um, compared to the end of it. So there was a phase where I and there was a phase where there was a towards the end of the relationship, um, I got in discussions with the mother, and she didn't really like the way I talked about things and the topics I brought up and how I would combat a lot of the things that she would say, and the daughter didn't like that. There were other things that cause issues. Some of them are more obvious than others. Um, there was also an element where uh, she was very insecure that I would cheat on her and that I was going to uh, be with other women. And I was never with other women. Even the ones I really wanted to, I was never with them. It's just, even the women that I would meet in public, she would be insecure about me. She would say, "Hey, you didn't say no, and you didn't reject her and stuff like that." Like whenever I would do a soft rejection of a woman or something. And there were women secretly vying for me that we both would like comment on. And I didn't know that they were trying to get with me, but then she would tell me, yeah, she was trying to get with me. And that was kind of a funny situation. Um, one thing I would say is that we were two individuals who weren't very perfect in the situation. Um, the she was we had made agreements, and there were secret dealings that I didn't know about that she finally expressed to me later, and they were pretty severe, very serious actions that she took against me, and I was surprisingly fairly quick to forgive that. But one thing I would say is I kept bringing it up later on instead of just letting it go. Uh, it, I would say towards the end it was hard keeping the secrets away from your parents because um, it was difficult to it's difficult holding in very serious things, but then relating with people as if nothing is going on, nothing's going wrong. She eventually would get on Tinder, um, and so this was actually part of my social experiment. This was actually something that I decided. So I told her to get on Tinder, and I told her to see how many guys she could get in a 24-hour period. Um, which I know some people would say it's stupid. And here's the thing: I had that much confidence in my partner. Um, so whenever she did start emotionally investing in the people while she was in a relationship with me, um, it caused some issues because I mean, at that point the experiment was over. It was pretty obvious compared to my account that her account was more successful. And I knew it would be. That was my initial thought, but I wanted to see it carried out in real life. And I noticed that she would add more and more and more emotional investment just by texting more and more and more. And this was in the midst of the relationship. So it was kind of like an emotional cheating, um, which afterwards or before the actual breakup, uh, I could kind of feel the shift. And even before the day before she left, when she left out the door, she said things like, I love you. And she would say things like, um, like very lovey-dovey kind of things, even hours before the breakup, which kind of frightened me a little, right? Like I wasn't used to that because this was my first LTR long-term relationship. Um, it was a little freaky. I didn't even know what was going on at first. I was kind of happy she came over to my place, but which she didn't usually do. Um, I usually went to hers, which one of the lessons that I've learned is that spending too much time with people make your time less valuable. Uh, you're spending too much time with someone, a lot of times your time ends up becoming less valuable to the person. Um, and I would go over there maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and sometimes I'd spend the night. And I think that caused, familiarity breeds contempt is the phrase that you could use for that. I think there's a lot of truth to that because throughout the relationship, I could see the waning of the emotions. And towards the end, what's funny is whenever she was not in a depressive state, she was actually refreshing. There were moments where she was refreshing to be around. But I was kind of riding her emotional roller coasters as opposed to just living my life, which I would say for any guys who are dealing with women who have depression, anxiety, and things like that, you still have to live your own life, and you're not their therapist. You're not there to to take care of them in that way. That's something they have to deal with on their own. It can be there to support, but it can't be something that you're heavily involved in. Because I was heavily involved in actually helping to a certain degree. Um, Not as much as a therapist, but I'm the partner that was with it. So, and one thing I would note about the relationship is that I was always willing to fix things and to make things better. But a lot of times there were a lot of covert contracts, a lot of covert things behind the desires that would pop up. And sometimes the desires that she had wouldn't pop up. They would just, like, I couldn't articulate them and she couldn't articulate them to me. So I had no way of solving the issue or making it better. So sometimes there were things that would come up multiple times and that I would have to fix. Um, so so the first time she actually broke up with me, and then we got back together again. So the first breakup was based off of behaviors that I was doing that she didn't like, that were very small, coincidental things, um, not very serious things. I've noticed that with a lot of women, things that aren't very serious for the long run end up being the things that break up a relationship. Um, for me, let me think. Like, for example, having the discussions with the mother, that's something that I think I could have eventually learned to temper, which I was. Um, uh, the other thing, compromising, listening to a person's needs. So that's something that required her to kind of express the need and to do it effectively to the point where I can meet the need, which, partners should meet each other's needs. This isn't just like man is the king of the castle or a woman, she's the queen, things like that. Like the energy you put into something and the energy the other person puts back out to you, if that's equalized, both people are going to have a good time. And I think that was the issue. I was putting in more effort than her, and she was kind of slowly losing interest. Probably months before the breakup. It could have been January, could have been sometime in February, could have been even earlier than that she lost interest. And I noticed it, but I didn't. It took me a while to realize Because sometimes you can get comfortable, and that comfortableness can kind of mask what's actually going on. But if I could go back, um, a couple of things I just want to say, just as a thought to guys. So, being overly forgiving a lot of times for women isn't good. Um, there were things that she did that I was too forgiving for, and I think that that caused a lack of respect on my part. Like she didn't respect me less, and in a way, I kind of, there was an element of that for me. It's like, wow, like, like you're gonna take that. Um, there were some. So one thing I would say back to the simping thing, like I just want to say for my channel's sake, this channel's not meant to attack guys who've been simps and who've had that kind of mentality, because I understand that a lot of guys grow up in an environment that creates that. Like um, there's no real way to get the masculine development that we had in the past. Now you kind of have to scavenge and figure out how to do it for yourself, especially if you're raised by a single mom. Which no one should ever use that as an excuse, but they should never forget that that's a real dynamic. So, a couple other things. Let me think. There were a lot of good times in the relationship. There was, we had very good times. We always went out to dinners and stuff like that. We would eat in, we would watch movies. Like we had some good times. One thing I would regret, one thing I'd say I regret is not uh, being able to reconcile things with her, because there were times where I would actually get emotional and text a lot and get angry and things like that. And one thing I would suggest with a guy who's having a falling out with his significant other is take your emotions out on other things. Don't take it out on the people, because whenever I did express my emotions in that way, um, a lot of the family, they probably caught wind of certain texts and stuff like that, and it got to the point where it wasn't like really bad, but like it was just one text, you know. But then that was enough to where it was almost like, it's almost like you could become the crazy ex and the crazy stalker moron person just because you get really emotional. And the only thing I can say to that is take your emotions out on pillows, go and talk to your friends, go and, do something that gets that gets that out, and you have to. I mean, however you do that, if you work out, if you need to talk to someone, uh, do it as often as you need. I know there's a lot of different times where guys, we think, man, we're just burdening these people. We don't want to burden people with our emotions because we're masculine. But um, there's one reason why I think it's good not to blow up on people is because one of the things I wanted with my partner was reconciliation, and I don't think I'll be able to get that. So I want guys to at least be able to get that if it's possible. And if it's possible, it's going to require you not to judge your partner based on their choices, because I mean that's them. They did what they did because they did it. You can't. I mean, in a way, you almost can't take it personal. Kind of like detach from the situation, because any type of reconciliation you want from that situation, you're likely not going to get if you lash out. And a lot of times, when you lash out and hurt their feelings and stuff like that, especially when you judge them and stuff, um, it could be a long time before they're open to actually wanting to have a discussion and things like that. Because I'm all about making things cordial and going opposite ways if you need to do that. Uh, so why I named the title the way I did is because um, a lot of times guys are, idealized by the women at first. I remember dating a woman, and the initial date, she was enamored with me. Her eyes were sparkling, and she looked at me with such adoration. But then, towards the end of our first date, she was kind of perplexed. She was almost angry. She was thinking, "Wait a minute, you're just like in her words, wait a minute, you're just not a nerd." She didn't say geek. She said, uh, it was an insult, but she didn't call me a geek or a nerd. It was like something else. I think it starts. Oh, a dork. So um, yeah, a lot of what she was idealizing, I didn't live up to in those small moments, and there was a lot that I learned from that. Now, how that factors into the current relationship, I'm not sure uh, at all, really. But I do know that there are a couple of things that can keep things rolling. Also, a couple of things that can keep your self respect towards the end of the relationship, and also things that can possibly give you reconciliation. I'm not saying you necessarily get back together, but at least you go out, um, as considering, assuming that she didn't do anything too super crazy. Because a lot of times people go back and forth on each other. But then with the women, their parents, a lot of times they'll be very defensive and protective. So it makes it harder for someone to reconcile the situation, which I would say I regret the most, not being able to reconcile and being able to apologize and, hopefully having the other person apologize for things that was going on. Um, yeah, a lot of times the family doesn't know the whole story. A lot of times, or the families involved in the breakups. And there's probably way worse breakups than mine. Um, but yeah. Uh, so that's kind of the main thing I wanted to say. So kind of like, yeah, in the picture it shows the angels falling from a high position. A lot of times when men fall from that place of respect in a woman's mind, it can be really easy to get replaced. And I don't know exactly when I was replaced, but I know once the machinations started getting rolling, uh, there was kind of like a it was kind of like a systematic phasing out of me. I think the first time I saw her again after the breakup, she still felt you know, like we were together. But then afterwards, because I saw her two times, it felt like a more anxious person, like a person who didn't want to be around me, which was interesting. Um, oh man, I definitely felt the urge to go down like let's just say a red pill rage. I think this would be considered my 2.0. I'm not really sure, but yeah, one thing that I would say, one of the main issues I think that caused the falling out of the relationship was accountability. I couldn't really hold her accountable for her position in the relationship because a lot of the things that she wanted from me, in particular, they were covert and they were secret. And some of the things she would lay out, and I would take care of these things. Now, someone explained to me that taking care of things in the end, when you figure out that it's about the end or that where you think that it's not going right or something like that, that can be bad too. But I don't believe that. If someone's putting an effort to make something happen, regardless of whether it's a man or a woman, they should be, uh, especially if that's what the person needs. And if that doesn't solve it, then there's something more going on in that situation. Which, yeah, um, Oh man. That's a yawn. Oh, done? No, I'm not done yet. Almost. So yeah, so one of the main things that was the issue was accountability. Simple. So one side holds themselves accountable for their partner relationship, and the other side holds themselves accountable for their partner relationship. It was a little bit one-sided. I was taking on more responsibility than I was supposed to. Or maybe I was supposed to take that, but it's like on the other side there was no equal level of accountability. It was it felt like something that I was responsible for at all times. So kind of like being responsible for a person's happiness. The idea that um, the idea of being responsible for a person's happiness is kind of ridiculous because when they're it's, when they go to a different emotion, then they can just look at you and blame you as a scapegoat, which I think there was an element of scapegoating going on in the situation. Um, but I think also the communication skills between the two of us were fairly bad in the first part of the relationship. There'd be times where I'd walk out the room and I wouldn't say anything, but then I would just come back as if nothing happened. And uh, of course, I didn't realize I was triggering abandonment issues and past traumas and things like that. But I guess I was responding based off of my past traumas. So um, yeah, I didn't know I was going to go for nearly 30 minutes. So this is interesting. The fall from grace is something that is painful, and it's something that can happen to any man. It doesn't matter how alpha or how beta, or just using the terms to describe the abstract. So it can happen to any guy, and it is uh, now when I say fall from grace, it could mean when you're getting monkey branch, when someone's cheating on you, which is monkey branching, or it's a different form. Or monkey branching is a more sophisticated way of cheating. Person emotionally cheats with someone else while they're in a relationship, and then right after the relationship, they're with someone else. That's kind of what happened, I believe. But um, one of the more interesting things that I was angry about towards the end was that I was kind of expected not to cheat, and I expected myself not to do that. But with monkey branching, a lot of times you are emotionally connecting with someone else while you're in a relationship with another person, and you're waiting on an opportunity to secure a branch so that you can move on to another branch. So you want to make sure you have a firm grasp on another branch. And right when you have a firm grasp, then you can let go of the other branch. So it felt like that's what was going on, which sucks. But um, that's where, see, one of the things is like with the accountability part, a lot of things could have gone really well. But I've noticed that in her particular family, they raised her to go with her emotions. They didn't give her a framework for relationships. They just kind of say, something like, whatever makes you happy, that's what we want. But a lot of times this is a catch 22 for women, and for the young girls growing up, it kind of screws them, because you're teaching your daughter to. A lot of people are teaching their daughters to only interact with someone um, in situations when they're happy, and to kind of maintain the relationship based off of their level of emotional high. And when they get emotionally low, they don't ride the wave until it goes high again. They just kind of lose interest. It creates, or it can create things like serial monogamy, where a person has 3 or 4 year relationships. And they're going, to 3 or 4 year relationships over and over and over again. So they're trying to pair bond, but they end up with 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, and their ability to pair bond later on kind of like diminishes. So by the time all those years go by, you have all these partners, and then the effect or the intended goal becomes more and more less and less possible as you go further down. Uh, yeah, I noticed that my ego definitely didn't like getting broken up. That caused a lot of issues. I noticed that I became very critical of my self-image. Um, One thing that I would say is there were several moments in a relationship where I felt I could have ended it and I should have. Um, but it's hard for people to end things when, in my opinion, it's hard for people to end things sometimes. And this was, a first relationship, and it was something that I was very heavily invested in, and that makes it very hard to just jump ship. Um, a lot of times people who have the least amount of emotional investment, they're the people who can end things uh, the quickest. They're the ones who have the greatest potential for ending. Um, yeah, I mean, there were a lot of good qualities that my partner had. There were some bad qualities that my partner had, and vice versa for me. Um, I think I covered all the main things I wanted to cover about this. But if I could do a recap on one of the main, just several of the main issues for the sake of the video. So, similar to the Cold War video, withholding sex was the main issue, was the main cause, because it started making my behavior worse. Uh, let's see what else. Uh, the dealings that I had with the family, conversations, things like that, that potentially, got very close to arguments and things like that. What else? Um, Little small things. I think those were the main things, but then also uh, needs of the other partner, which a lot of those needs were met, but then some of the needs I couldn't meet because they weren't expressed. Um, I think those are the main things. Um, One thing I would say is if you're not getting the fun parts, then that could be a situation, in my opinion, where you kind of have to cut your losses after you attempt to figure out what's going on and find a compromise. But then you can't really go further beyond that because I've noticed. So after my relationship, that we after what we had, it was like less than a week or two later, and then there was another person in the picture getting all the attention and all the fun times, and that was something that kind of, um, in my opinion, it kind of proved that there was never anything wrong. It was just that the sexual attraction was lost, and there were nice words put in place of that to kind of explain that situation. Um, and it was simply a situation where there was a desire to move on to a person who was more sexually attractive. Uh, so I'm not gonna lie, it really sucked. But the hope is that to at least help someone to figure things out. So if you're a guy and you're not getting good treatment, she starts like she starts treating you like you're not important, and she's not enthusiastic about solving or about giving you things that you want. In my opinion, that's the perfect time to start getting your ducks in a row and start moving. And you don't necessarily have to get a chick and move on. Just literally cut it off. Go spend time alone. And, you know, in my opinion, staying in it until she actually inevitably does it herself, it's so. This is what I've noticed. It's not as good. So there's different consequences for being dumped from men and women. In a social situation, if a man is dumped or if he's rejected by a woman and there's other women, there's a lot of there's a lot more there's different consequences for that. So if a woman dumps a guy and other women know about it in that area, that guy is going to be his social status is going to lower by proxy of the appraisal of the woman who dumped the guy. So now if a woman, if she's dumped in a social situation by a guy, it's not going to have that same effect. Um, uh, so one thing I would say is the effects of being dumped from a guy versus a girl is very different. A lot of times, guys, after they're dumped, they don't have the confidence to be able to go and talk to another chick, another woman, effectively because they're kind of, it causes issues. Now, women probably wouldn't have the confidence to allow someone to come up and talk to them, to be fair. Um, but, that's an aside. Um, yeah, I think that's about all I got. So, just to do a recap, towards the beginning, it was good. Middle, and then towards the end, I noticed that there was a lack of appreciation for me, and there wasn't really, it didn't feel like, it didn't seem as though there was accountability on both sides. It seemed like most of the accountability was on me, and I was being held responsible for the person's happiness, which I would explain is not something that I can physically do. I can't make that happen. Um, so a lot of times people depend on their partners for the wrong things. And I think that's what happened partially. But then also the person was just, there was certain parts of the person that wasn't really healed from the last relationship. And it kind of came out. There were a lot of ghosts. I call them. I might do a video on that. And those ghosts kind of haunted the relationship pretty much the whole time. In fact, the there were times where the person would come up in conversation, and there was even a time where she went out and she visited an ex and said that she needed to get things taken care of, situated, and stuff like that. Which I wasn't sure about that. I always had a fear that she was cheating during that time, and it's extremely possible. Um, but I don't know. Now she's actually moved on to a guy. They're supposedly getting married because she got pregnant. I think a week or two after. Uh, a week or two after I was with her, and it was very disturbing to say the least. I had a lot of reflections on a lot of different things. Appraising my own value after that. That's one thing that breakups help uh, with guys. It makes you very conscious of your value to women when you get broken up with. Now, when you break up with a woman, that's different. Um, One thing I would say is going no contact with a woman after a breakup is effective. Um, Sometimes you can reach out. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes there's things left unsaid that you want to finish, and that's okay. Um, you know. Anyways, yeah. So I was very unhappy from the situation for a while. I was also unhappy I didn't get to reconcile a lot of the issues and explain my side, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I actually wish my partner very well, and I hope that, I hope her life goes better than it started because she's gone through quite a lot. Um, just to a lot of guys in this community, in the red pill manosphere community, uh, I want to say, um, I understand that there's a lot of things that you're angry about. There's a lot of good reason to be angry about these things, but there's uh, there's a human component that I think you always have to be connected to, and you can't separate yourself from the human condition. A lot of the things that women are doing, if we were women, we would do the same things just by the nature of having the opportunity to do it. Um, I think that the manosphere and the red pill, all of these ideas can go really far. But the guys who are really angry, who have a lot of despair, we need to reach out to them and pick them up so that they can actually go to a higher vibration. And it's a given for them to feel like that. And I completely understand it. I was there for a while. So we don't need guys judging those guys. We just need people to pick them up and pull them on to the boat so that they can make their own decision. Now, they don't have to get married or anything like that. That was one thing I was adamant about in my relationship with the ex was I didn't want to get legally married, and I even talked to the mother and said, "Well, if she decides to do something to me, I can't do anything about it." And what's weird is that the fact that she broke up with me based off of how she felt, it kind of proved to me, okay, this would have actually been a very bad move because if I married her and had kids with her, she could have broke up with me again based off of how she felt. She kind of demonstrated to me the very reason I didn't want to get married in the first place, which I still loved her. I still love her, but it's it's kind of a moving on kind of situation. All right, yeah. The fall from grace.